Really appreciate that. And yes, thank you, Julia. We are recording this presentation as well. And we are going to have some time at the end. So we have two presenters today. And at the end of each presentation, we're going to give some time for questions to be asked. So we encourage everyone's participation. This is, a place that we can have an open conversation. So please ask any questions that you may have. And you can either type the questions on the chat as you think of it, in case you're worried that you're going to forget. And then we'll just go over the questions that are on the chat at the end of each presentation. Or you're more than welcome to also put yourself off of mute and ask that question directly. So now I'm just going to turn it to Amy Eden, our other Region 3 FEMA Val. Amy, do you have anything that you want to say before we get started?
Sure. Good morning and welcome to the second offering of the Disaster Case Management webinar. We're excited for you to join us today. We look forward to continued partnering and collaboration with each of you. And to echo what Julia just said, please feel free to ask questions, whether that's putting them in the chat or raising your hand or taking yourself off mute. We love questions and want this to be as interactive as possible. And I'm going to turn it back over to Julia and thank you all for attending.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amy. So let's go ahead and get started with our first presenter for today. Her name is Alicia Maurice, and she's our individual assistance representative from FEMA. She's going to be talking about our individual assistance programs, policies, and sequence of delivery. So Alicia, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
So thank you for having me. I believe I'm sharing my screen. Can you confirm that you see?
Not yet. We can't see it.
Okay. Oops.
Perfect. There you go.
Okay. So last time I did that first, I was not able to turn my camera on, which might be a good thing. My name is Alicia. I'm still playing with it to see if I can figure it out, but it's not looking good. Okay. My name is Alicia. I'm with the program management section for FEMA. I am the individual assistance liaison for disaster 4618 Pennsylvania. And today I want to talk about some of the appeal opportunities and our sequence of delivery. So the 4618 Pennsylvania was declared on September 10th. The incident period is from August 31st to September 5th. We have various causes of damage that are eligible in this declaration. The application period will close on December 10th. 10 more days. The IHP financial closure, however, is March 10th, 2023, and we have 8 designated counties for IA. So first, what I want to talk about are the IHP programs and what areas or types of assistance are subject to our cap, which ones aren't. So basically, we've got the 2 programs, our housing assistance, which covers rental assistance, lodging, home repair, home replacement, and then other needs assistance, which are personal property transportation, moving and storage, medical, dental, funeral, childcare, miscellaneous other, and the GFIP group flood insurance policy. The maximum for housing assistance is $36,000 for this disaster, and we have the same maximum for other needs. And as we move along into these slides, you're going to see other areas of assistance that are not subject to these maximums. Okay, so the IHP assistance maximum, or the items that are not subject to the IHP maximum, I'm sorry, they have no maximum applicable, and that includes all types of temporary housing assistance, including lodging expense reimbursement and rental assistance up to 18 months. Also removed from the cap are housing accessibility items. If it falls under housing, that could be either an ADA access ramp or grab bars. And then we also have accessibility items that are not subject to to any maximum that fall under personal property. But you have to keep in mind, anything under personal property is dependent on the SBA, and we'll get into that deeper here in just a moment. These items, the award amounts are based on receipts or fair market rent. So for example, if an applicant had lodging expenses, then they would send in their hotel receipts. If one of our applicants wanted to apply for the continued rental assistance, it would go by fair market rate. The housing accessibility and ONA accessibility items, we can pay those at actual, which we're also going to talk about here in a moment. And those would be based off receipts after the initial assistance went out. So we have our typical general conditions of eligibility, which is standard and hasn't changed much over the years. An applicant must be a U.S. citizen, non-citizen national, or qualified alien, must be able to verify their identity. The applicant's insurance or other forms of disaster assistance received cannot meet their disaster cause needs, and that the applicant's necessary expenses and serious needs are directly caused by a declared disaster. But then in order to receive other types of assistance under HA and ONA, applicants may be required to satisfy additional conditions of eligibility, such as proof of occupancy, home ownership, and identity. We recently went through a lot of policy and processing changes that came into effect in August, right before Pennsylvania got declared. So a lot of this under occupancy and ownership is new. We won't go through all of this, but for each one, I've got a slide here that shows what we've always been able to accept for occupancy. The typical things like a utility bill, a merchant's document, employer document, a lease, rent receipts, things like that. But we've also added some expanded occupancy verification documents that applicants can send in that are having a harder time proving occupancy. And that could be a merchant statement is now considered other bills and includes medical provider bills. Let's see, we changed the requirement on leases, no longer need to have a signature from the landlord, and then employer documents. Also under occupancy, we're able to accept written statements from social service organizations, such as Centers for Independent Living, Wheels on Meals, National Urban League, etc. We are also accepting local school documents to include a letter or written statement, and it just goes on down the line. Mobile home park documents can include a written statement from the park owner. And then same with travel trailer. As a last resort, we are back to accepting if all else fails, occupancy cannot be proven. As of August, like 2 declarations before we got Pennsylvania, we can now go back to taking a self-declarative statement for occupancy for folks who live in mobile homes or travel trailers. And then ownership was also expanded. We have the current list of documents. Oh, and by the way, all of this is available in the IAPPG, so you don't have to remember all this, but we've got the general documents that we've always been able to take, deeds, property tax receipts. We have expanded it to be, they must be dated within 1 year to the disaster or within 18 months of the period of assistance. And then some of the new documents that we can accept include receipts for major repairs or improvements dated within the last 5 years, public official letter or written statement, court documents. This one I found very helpful for folks that live in mobile homes or travel trailers that maybe they don't hold the formal title. It may possibly given to them. We can now take a written statement from a park owner or manager verifying that a certain individual owned that mobile home or travel trailer. And we are also now accepting airship self-declarative statements as a last resort. In fact, I'm actually working a case right now. We're waiting for word back as to whether the document, the affidavit of airship is acceptable. So again, the housing assistance all housing assistance is non-SBA dependent, which includes home replacement up to 36,000, home repair up to 36,000. And then the temporary housing assistance again has no maximum, and that would include the rental assistance up to 18 months and lodging expense reimbursement. So this is about ONA, our other needs assistance. Some types of ONA may only be provided if an applicant does not qualify for a disaster loan from the SBA, the Small Business Administration. The 3 items that are SBA dependent, again, are personal property, transportation assistance, and the GFIP. So when I get to this slide, I immediately see what could possibly be an appeal opportunity, because if we inspect a vehicle and it is repairable, the system is automatically only going to provide $50. At that point, we're waiting for the applicant to submit a written appeal and a mechanic's estimate or receipt showing what it will cost to repair that vehicle. And that can go for Pennsylvania for 4618. Repair can go up to $9,399. And if the vehicle is destroyed, the replacement amount that we can assist with is $9,400. And then the non-SBA dependent ONA categories include assistance in 4618 Pennsylvania. That is up to $10,000 per decedent. For this disaster for 4618, we have paid 2 funerals. Also non-SBA dependent are the medical and dental assistance. Child care assistance is $7,200 per household for 4618. And then also assistance for miscellaneous items and moving and storage are not SBA dependent. So when we're looking at these ONA items, ONA personal property ADA items, remember, they're not subject to the ONA max and can be paid at actual on appeal with supporting documentation. But we have to remember, if it's one of these ONA ADA items that's listed in this box, it is subject to an SBA loan, and it cannot be paid under medical because they're listed as these ADA items. If it's an item, another medical equipment that's not listed here, such as glasses, hearing aids, excuse me, CPAP machines, we pay those under medical. Okay, so now these are to me are exciting appeal opportunities, and let me explain why. FEMA may provide assistance or reimbursement for the actual cost associated with the repair or replacement of the following home repair items. The private wells, furnace, septic systems, and privately owned access roads and bridges. Also, what we can pay at actual for is an ADA access ramp and grab bars. Now, keep in mind that wells, furnace, septics, everything home repair is subject to the HA max. So if I may, I'm going to stop right here because I'm actually working with an applicant here in Pennsylvania. The home damage exceeds the 36,000. So he's eligible for 36,000 for home repair. We actually had to send this back out on appeal inspection to address the ADA access ramp. This case was brought to my attention because it was actually an elevator. And my first instinct was, we don't do elevators. We don't even have a line item for elevator. But I was quickly reminded that it could fall under the ADA access ramp. So it went back out on appeal inspection. It came back yesterday, and the inspector did record the ADA access ramp. They have submitted their written appeal and the estimate for this access / elevator, which is what prompted the appeal inspection. And it is now back at our processing procedures team to review the eligibility for this access elevator. The estimate is $24,000. This will be the first that I've ever seen where we were able to offer the home home repair maximum of 36,000, and hopefully all of our fingers are crossed, the elevator will come back as approved as ADA access, lift, ramp, elevator, whatever, but we're hoping to get that answer back today. I just had to throw that in because it's something new that I've never seen. Now, we've also got listed uninsurable items here. Insured applicants that have flood insurance, and even applicants that are non-compliant because maybe they have a flood requirement that was previously placed on their property may still be eligible to receive home repair for wells, septics, and privately owned access roads and bridges. These are more appeal opportunities, and it's especially helpful for folks that have flood insurance because and I have seen many homes as I look through all these inspection reports where homes have sustained major damage, but it's going to be covered under their flood insurance. Well, when it came back from inspection, that we're seeing cases that had the line item for well, septic, or privately owned access roads and bridges. So these applicants that had major damage didn't receive a whole lot of money from FEMA will initially get what we call a service call. So I think the service call amount for each one of these is around $174. The reason for that is because we don't know what it's going to cost to repair or replace that well or that septic system. So we just send out a service call amount, and what we're waiting for is the applicant to come back with a written appeal and an estimate as to what it will cost to replace or repair those items. Let's see. Oh, and these are subject to the IHP maximum. And then this real quick is just some of the new things, the new changes that happened recently this summer, right before Pennsylvania got declared. We now offer disaster-caused mold, assistance for disaster-caused mold, financial assistance to clean or repair real property components impacted by mold growth. For Pennsylvania, that dollar amount is $1,500. That is not necessarily, it's a set amount. So we can't necessarily appeal for more dollars for mold removal. However, there are all kinds of appeal opportunities with the well, septics, furnace, things that we pay actual for, excuse me, the ADA access ramps, even if it's an elevator. Let's see. Okay, also new is disaster-caused ADA real property. Okay, the reason this is a little bit different than the survivor I was telling you about that lost the elevator that lifted his father to the damaged dwelling is because he owned that access elevator prior to the disaster. But now we can offer financial assistance for adding real property accessibility related items limited to grab bars and a ramp and a paved pathway when these items are necessary to make the home safe and functional for someone who has a disaster-caused disability, meaning they didn't own that ramp before, but need it now because of injuries due to the disaster. So that's new. Also new is our clean and sanitize. It's a limited amount of financial assistance for renters or homeowners with disaster-caused real property damage that did not render the home uninhabitable. So most of us know these as, ineligible, insufficient damage, meaning the home is safe to live in. But now what we're offering is the clean and sanitize, and it is a set amount that's $300. And then they've lifted the amount, and I would need an SBA person really to speak intelligently on this. But what I can tell you about this change is basically what it says: while FEMA will continue to refer all applicants that meet the minimum income test, to the SBA, FEMA is choosing to provide FEMA assistance for SBA dependent owner for some low income applicants that meet the SBA's minimum income test prior to their loan evaluation by the SBA. So when I first read that, I immediately thought, well, wait a minute, that sounds like a duplication of benefits. Okay, because if FEMA offers it, and then they are approved for a loan. When I asked the question, what I was told was, if they are later found eligible for the loan, they will reduce the loan amount to remove the dollars for anything that FEMA did assist with. Okay, so how to appeal is basically the same as it's always been. There is a 60-day time frame to appeal. We are past that. So I wanted to point out the fact that late appeals will be considered with a written or verbal explanation as to why the appeal was late. What we hear most often is lack of available contractors, or illness, or work, or something that prevented that applicant from appealing within the 60 days. The appeal must be in writing or typed, include the name, FEMA application number, disaster number, address of the pre-disaster primary residence, the current phone number, and any documents to support the appeal request, such as repair estimates, contractor estimates, a mechanic statement if you're appealing for the vehicle. There's several ways that our applicants can appeal. They can fax it, they can mail it to the National Processing Service Center, and they can also upload them themselves if they create what we call a DAC account, a Disaster Assistance Center account on FEMA.gov. And then also I want to point out, you're probably already aware that we do have that OMB recently approved written consent form. This form can be printed and handed to an applicant, mailed to an applicant, or the applicant can access the form at FEMA.gov. And I've got the link in here. Before we had this, and we required applicants write out all this information. This is still what's required if you're just writing it out, but I would suggest using the form. It's much more convenient. Also wanted to point out real quick, I try to stay away from powers of attorney for written consent. And basically we can accept a power of attorney from an applicant's assigned third party if it meets the state law requirements where the applicant resides. Since these instruments are different, have different restrictions and authorizations, the submitted information must now be coordinated further by OCC. So it has to be reviewed by one of our counsels, one of our attorneys, to validate prior to sharing the information. So it's just much easier to use the form because it seems what I've noticed is the power of attorneys take much longer to get approved. I believe that, this is the new form. And that was all. I did want to mention one other appeal opportunity, and that is the level of damage. So outside of appealing for the items that we pay actual for, which again is the well, the septics, privately owned access roads and bridges, ADA ramps, and furnaces. If an applicant, the way that our home repair assistance works, it's based on levels of damage. So there might be applicants that receive the same amount, and that's because of the level of damage, the award packages. It's very, and I'm watching these appeals as they're coming into our NIPSEs being processed and paid. So if you don't agree with the amount, the dollar amount of the home repair, then all you would need to do is submit a written appeal and a contractor's estimate as to what it's going to cost to repair the home. If that estimate exceeds the home repair amount that we offered, then we can advance that applicant to the next level of damage. So it's really important that folks take advantage of the appeal opportunities. And that's all I had available to take any questions. Here's my camera, but I didn't have.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alicia. I'm looking over the chat. I don't really see anything. Does anyone have any questions for Alicia? Feel free to unmute or raise your hand or type it in the chat. I actually did have a question. On the new policies, you're talking about how as a last resort, people can kind of self-declare that they are the owners of that property. Is that specifically for mobile homes or is it for all sorts of homes?
Okay, so in order to take a self-declarative statement for ownership, you either have to be, we have three categories. The first one doesn't fit Pennsylvania. It's for areas like insular areas or tribal territories, which doesn't fit in this one. Let's see, applicants that are under an heirship situation that possibly their family member passed away without a will. So we have to first try the affidavit of heirship. And then at that point, if that doesn't work, then they can do the self-declarative statement. And then the third category are folks in mobile homes and travel trailers.
Perfect, thank you. I do see here a question from Jan in the chat. She's asking, are they able to appeal after the December 10 deadline?
Oh, absolutely. I think the IHP financial closure, I would have to go back to the beginning, is March 10th of 2023. So we've got a long way out on this disaster to accept appeals. Just keep in mind that as we move forward, and because we are more than 60 days in, they just need to put a reason why they're appealing after the 60-day deadline.
Yeah, so just to clarify, again, this is Julia. The December 10 deadline is the deadline for people to apply for FEMA assistance. But once they applied for it, if there's any reason why they need to appeal, then they have the 60 days from the date of the letter that they received. So the deadline is in tune with that 60-day deadline. And again, like Alicia said, if they do go over that 60-day period, they can still appeal it and justify, explain why. Anyone else has any questions? Please feel free to unmute or use the chat. All right, hearing none. Thank you so much, Alicia, for your help. And we will be emailing some additional information as well. Alicia did mention the IAPPG, and I see here that Amy Eden has also posted it on the chat. So thank you so much for doing that. But we are going to send that document. It's just a FEMA document that kind of explains the individual assistance program in depth. So it's a really good read. And then why don't we go ahead and take a 5-minute break before we continue with our next presenter, which is going to be Anthony Pukino. But let's just go ahead and meet again. Let's say 10:35, just for the sake of the numbers. So we'll meet again at 10:35. Just have some time to go to the bathroom, get some coffee, and we'll see you in a little bit. Thank you.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you, Anthony.
All right. Right, okay, good.
All right, I see on the clock it's 10:35. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you were able to take a little breathing time between our presentations. And then once again, just as a reminder, if you haven't already, please put your name and your contact information in the chat, just because we're trying to track all of the participants, and we do have some additional materials that we would like to send at the end of the presentation. So please make sure that you're writing that on the chat for us. I really appreciate it. And then let's go ahead and get started with our next presenter. It's Anthony Pukino. He is our Chief Programs Officer for the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. And he is here to help us, the case managers, navigate disaster casework, appeal tips, best practices on disaster case management. So once again, we will have time at the end of the presentation for questions. We do encourage you to participate. We want us to be, able to communicate with you all and answer any questions that you may have. So feel free to ask the question on the chat, and we'll circle back to it at the end. Or, at the end of the presentation, you can always just ask it on the chat or unmute. All right, there you go, Anthony. Thank you so much.
Good morning. You can hear me. Just make certain I'm off mute.
Yes, you sound perfect.
My video, and we're good to go.
Looking
All
good.
right, we just had to get these technical issues out of the way and make certain we're good to go. So good morning. Hope you all had an enjoyable Thanksgiving holiday, and thanks for being here today. I'm going to talk about, as Julia mentioned, a high-level DCMP and some best practices, how it relates to FEMA appeals, and the LTRGs. So again, we'll be high level. So if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in and put your questions into the chat or raise your hand, and Julia will be monitoring the chat. All right, so my background, I started in as a DCM with Catholic Charities, with Sandy, started doing, involved a little bit with IDCM, and then IDCM was an immediate disaster case management program, which no longer, that program is no longer available with FEMA. So I worked with Catholic Charities, and then I went to work with St. Vincent de Paul, and I started there as a manager, and now I'm the Chief Programs Officer, and I manage all of the DCMP programs throughout the country. St. Vincent de Paul has been involved in numerous disaster case management programs throughout the country. We have quite an extensive portfolio of DCMPs in which we've been involved in, both private and, as you can see, federally funded. And more recently, we've been involved with the Louisiana floods, the Hurricane Harvey in Texas. We had a FEMA cooperative agreement with in Puerto Rico, and then we had the Michael and Irma DCMPs in Florida, and currently we're working with the DCMP in the state of Oregon. We've been involved in different types of FEMA contracts, going from cooperatives to national VOAD sponsored to state sponsored, and we've worked with all of these different types of agencies. So these are some of the services that St. Vincent de Paul provides. In addition to that, we also have our Trademark House in a Box program. And what you see here is a picture of all the items that literally fit in a box, and you can put it in the back of a pickup truck. We have different versions of this. The The basic version is where we set up a warehouse, receive donations from local St. Vincent de Paul councils and conferences, and then we can obtain these different pieces of furniture, and then to eligible individuals and families, we can provide the furniture. There'll be in some cases there may be where the individual has to put some of the pieces together, but most of these items, as I mentioned, can fit in the back of a pickup truck. And these are some of the areas in which we've been involved in this House in a Box program. We're currently working with St. Vincent de Paul in Tennessee, looking to help out with the storms that they had in that area, and we're looking to set up a program like this, working with the long-term recovery group. So when we look at a disaster, I mean, now we're going to switch gears and think about the DCM. And the first thing I want to just talk about is the disaster. So we're looking at a disaster as an event that disrupts normal life, causing physical and mental trauma and damage to property and/or community infrastructure. Disasters may include hurricanes, tornado, storm, flood, wind, driven water, tidal waves, tsunami, earthquake, volcanic eruption, landslide, mudslide, snowstorms, fire explosion, active public violence, terrorism, or technological disasters involving toxic matters. So the disasters cause a disruption in the normal life, and now you have families and individuals that are just distraught, confused, high anxiety, don't know what to do, and they're looking for help. You have, when you look at the disaster management cycle, you look at the event, and then you have the immediate response, in which FEMA and local authorities, Office of Emergency Management, come in and attempt to kind of stabilize the situation with all of the with the individuals or the affected families, and they'll come in during this response phase. Then you have in the recovery phase, and this is where you'll have FEMA will come in. Sorry for any noise that's happening outside there. You'll have different programs that will come in. FEMA, as I said, will come in. So you have public assistance and individual assistance programs. Some federal programs and the DCMP programs will come in. And this is in your recovery phase. And then after that, you'll have a mitigation. And then, and this will be a phase where different organizations are trying to mitigate any future disasters. And then you had the phase where there was a preparation and training for the next event or next disaster that happens. So we want to focus in on the recovery stage. So we talk about, again, with the prior slide, where the individual and the families are all distraught and they're all upset. And if you listen to what Alicia presented this morning with all the different options, and there's a lot of different things that are going on. Did they register with FEMA? Did they not? So you have all these different factors that are going on. And that's one of the reasons why, if you have a DCMP program or you have a disaster case manager, this will help those individuals and will help the survivors and families that to be able to help them sort things out. So when we look at what is a DCM, a disaster case manager, it's the program and is a time limited process by which a skilled helper disaster case manager partners with a disaster affected individual or family client in order to plan for and achieve realistic goals for the recovery following a disaster. And then the DCM and the DCM program will help those individuals kind of level set them and give them some exposure to the different options that they have available and kind of settle them down so this way they can focus on the next item. Who are these case managers? This have specialized knowledge and skills regarding disaster recovery, resources, advocacy, and case presentation, assessment of survivors and disaster recovery planning, potential impact of the disaster or survivors' overall well-being and ability to cope, and the recovery needs of vulnerable populations after a disaster. Some of the soft skills that they need to have are communications, leadership, teamwork, problem solving, good work ethic, flexibility and adaptability, interpersonal skills. Now, the interpersonal skills huge because you're always dealing with so many different clients, different levels, different backgrounds, education, and different needs. And then you're also dealing with different organizations. But the key thing I like to look at is the flexibility and adaptability is structured as these DCM programs are. Things change and policies change and procedures change, and they can change from FEMA, they can change from the state, they can change from the program director. And if someone is not that flexible and very rigid, he or she can have some difficulty. So especially in disasters, we always talk about being flexible and adaptable, and that's a key item there. Some of the responsibilities of a case manager: develop a resource list of interagency contacts and have a working understanding of the programs available. Identifying the resources is a big key. Then we have assist the client to develop a long-range recovery plan. And this is extremely important, having a recovery plan. This allows us to identify the unmet needs and what the goals are. Explore all available options, identify the client's own resources, and access government community resources that will address disaster caused needs. that long-term recovery plan is huge. It's something that we always look for when setting up programs. We make certain that all of our clients have that. And then we have assess unmet recovery needs with the client through interviewing, making appropriate referrals, and then providing advocacy for the client. And then we have keep a written narrative of the work done on the case and document every phone call and every contact with the client, with vendors, agencies, co-workers, etc. And I have here highlighted in bold, this is most important. You need to tell the story. So this way, if you're ever asked, if ever there's an audit that's performed, and we do get audited by FEMA, you want the reader to be able to.
I forgot about this. It's this webinar I'm supposed to watch.
Oh, okay.
Please put your phones on mute. All right, thank you. I'm getting feedback.
When do we need to go by?
Please put your phone on mute. Okay. So the case notes is very important. So this way, if you get audited, they'll be able to see what has been done, what referrals or services provided, and also in the event that you transferring the case to another DCM or another agency, you have a detailed description as to what has been done for that case. So a few additional responsibilities. The DCM will help set priority unmet needs, and they will also share those unmet needs with the LTRC and LTRC Long-Term Recovery Committee. It could also be Long-Term Recovery Group, and they'll communicate back to the client the assistance to be provided from the LTRC and any limitations to the assistance. The case manager also can make any necessary referrals to fill gaps in assistance. And when we talk about filling gaps, you get funds maybe from FEMA, maybe from the insurance, maybe from some other organizations, but there's a dollar amount of assistance that you need to recover. And there may be a difference from all of the assistance you received and that recovery amount. And that's where the DCM can help fill that gap. And then you have verify the results of the assistance provided and document in the file in order to close out the case. When you look at, many times we like to compare the role of a DCM versus a DCW, disaster caseworker. And the caseworker is mostly involved in short-term assistance, whereas a DCM is more of a long-term. DCMs also, because it's long-term, you're developing a long-term recovery plan, and more of the caseworkers, as I said, short-term. There's not a long-term commitment. They're looking at also short-term, perhaps what they call INR, information and referrals. And it may be some of the cases that we have, they can just do a referral, and then that's all they need in order to for the client to be for the client's unmet needs to be satisfied. When we look at the case management process, we have several steps, and we look at the outreach and screening, and that could be involve different steps. It could be having special events. It could be if you had a list from OEM, could be a direct housing list. It could be the FEMA registration list, the ISAA list that can be used. And then when you have the screening process, depending upon the agency, you can have a different form that's used that can screen them to determine whether or not the survivor client is eligible for a DCMP or eligible for any assistance. And then that that will help to either just give them a simple INR so they can be, some of their unmet needs can be satisfied, or you can move them into more of the long-term recovery, where you would have to go through a detailed intake process, and that would involve obtaining several pieces of information. And then what will the next step will involve doing an assessment, and then setting different priorities and planning and putting together a recovery plan. And one of the things that we look at are tier assignments, and we have tier assignments going from 1 through 4, and 4 being the most difficult, with the households with the most immediate and also long-term needs, and they're generally with disabled, elderly, low income, and they have a high level of social service need, and these types of tier level, you'll need to have weekly contacts with the DCM and be tracked very closely, versus a tier level 1, which is very basic needs, very unmet needs, and this can be more like an information and referral type situation, where you can just address those basic unmet needs very easily. So that's what's involved with the assessment and the planning, and this also helps to prioritize the cases. And also when we're looking at the caseload of a DCM, we also use the tier levels 1 through 4 to make certain that a DCM doesn't have, let's say, for example, all tier level 4s, because they'll be going nuts. Those are very difficult cases. So the supervisors will use the tier levels to assign the cases and to make certain that there's an equal distribution of cases per DCM. And generally with the DCMs, we look at an average case size load of about 35 cases to one DCM. So then now they have this, so now they've done their assessment, they've created a recovery plan, and the next step is to take a look at their recovery plan, look at the unmet needs, and start to perform action items on them. And DCM will look to see if they can match up some of the unmet needs with some of the resources that are out there. And they're basically going to advocate on behalf of their client and try to address the unmet needs. And then there is the next step of monitoring. And if they are able to, let's say there's a need for furniture, they obtain the furniture, then the DCM with the client will help monitor the process of putting the order in, getting the furniture, having it assembled, having it delivered, and all of those items. And likewise, if they were planning to if they receive some assistance on doing the getting a roof repaired, they would help with that process also. And then as they monitor it again, as they're monitoring the case, they're putting information into the case notes and making certain that that's updated. And then you have the closure, and this involves collaboration with the DCM supervisor and also with the client to make certain that the unmet needs are or have been addressed. And then finally, an evaluation where a survey is generally sent out to the client, asking and requesting some information and feedback on how the whole process worked for them. And this last procedure again is a key point, is a collaboration between the client, DCM, and DCM supervisor, making certain that those unmet needs have been achieved. Some of the forms that the DCMs will have to deal with: there's an intake form, release form. There's release forms that they'll have for the program, a release to share information. You heard earlier from Alicia, there's a release of information form for Fema to be able to get information from Fema. There'll be a release form if they're using different databases, and currently databases that are being used nowadays are the Coordinated Assistance Network, CAN. There's a DART system that uses a Vision Link platform. So whatever database platform you're looking to utilize, you'll need to get some sort of a release. Recovery plans is something that's always put into the file, and then any case presentation documents that are needed. And by the way, the trend has been to put all these into hard papers into a folder, and now the trend is to because of COVID and the possibility of not going back to the office, to digitize all these files so you have digital copies, and these are things that we've been implementing the last few years. When you look at, whoops, sorry about that. When you look at the DCM, they're the central figure here in which they communicate and relate to state department, federal government, FEMA, LTRCs, private, voluntary government. As you can see, they're the focal point, and you have the client communicates to the DCM. The DCM in turn will communicate to any of these agencies, in terms of advocating and being able to obtain assistance and for their clients. I know we talked about the sequence of delivery, and when we looked at the sequence, one of the key things that I want you to look at is one, it starts with the voluntary agencies, and when you look at any of the end results, it ends with the voluntary agencies. The other item is that with what we're seeing a lot of is with this ONA, what we're seeing is that the clients will register with FEMA. And I know FEMA tells them you may or may not be eligible and to apply for the SBA. And we're seeing that a lot of the eligible households are not applying for SBA, and therefore they are not eligible for some of the ONA benefits that may be available to them. And in some cases, they may be leaving money on the table. And this has been something where a lot of the nonprofits that are involved in disaster case management have been putting a big emphasis on making certain that the clients apply for these SBA loans. And when you mention SBA to them, they think it's a loan and I can't pay it back, or I'm not a business. But that's an education, a point of educating them. That's part of the process, and that could help them with ONA. So we talked about the DCMs. We talked about them, what their role is, and part of their role is to help with some FEMA appeals. And here you have a situation was when someone calls for a FEMA, they get an inspector, they come down, and then there's a decision letter. And in some cases, the individual or family may get some dollars that are assigned to them or awarded to them to put them into a safe, sanitary, and secure environment. And one of the key things we always tell all of our clients, if you receive any money from FEMA, make certain that you use it for the purposes intended, and also make certain that you have receipts to show what they've been used for. And many times then when you have receive a letter, and sometimes that letter could be a letter of the decision letter, could be your decline. So and the question becomes, can you appeal? And here's some basic guidelines. 60 days within a FEMA decision, have the denial letter, significant information or evidence from a third-party source, and if yes, you can go ahead and appeal. But I would say you should always think about appealing. And Alicia brought up some great opportunities this morning or earlier about different situations in which that you could appeal. And we keep on telling you all about DCMs to look at those different opportunities to see if you can appeal. And that's something that we always like to track, is whether or not a client's been whether or not there's an opportunity to file an appeal letter. Here are some common reasons for FEMA ineligibility: insurance. The insurance that was paid out may not be sufficient to cover the loss, and in that case, you may be able to get additional assistance from FEMA. No proof of occupancy, and the individual wasn't able to demonstrate the proof that they occupied the home. But as you heard earlier, there's new guidelines that have come out, which have expanded what can be appealed and the documentation that can be provided, and which should help many individuals. In the past, this was a very difficult time where if you didn't have proof, you're out of luck. But now some of those, some of that guidance has been expanded, and that should help out. Identity verification. This is where the individual is not able to identify their identity, and again, that has also been expanded. You can look at payroll documents, military IDs, marriage license, and passports, and other information. And then the other item is the insufficient damage, and this was where the inspector determined the damage caused by the current disaster has not made your home unsafe to live in. But things change, and sometimes the foundation shifts afterwards. So you can get a third-party documentation in writing, and you can appeal. You can appeal personal property, real property, and rental assistance. And here is one of the sample letters that will include in the documentation that shows what the how to. And this is an actual appeal letter that we submitted, and I think it was a shift in the Homes Foundation after the floods, 2016. So this is kind of a sample as to what we have done. When a client is registered with FEMA, we recommend that they get a set up a DAC account, and this is how you can do it. And in addition, then we can, once that's set up, the DCM can look for duplication of benefits. And this duplication of benefits, various forms of assistance and programs that help people whose properties have been damaged by natural disasters to rebuild and relocate. Other sources cannot be used to duplicate what the federal assistance has provided. And the key here is we don't want to duplicate benefits, because if there is, and it's determined that there is a duplication, there may be a recoupment letter that comes later on. So when DCMs are working with clients, they want to get a duplication of benefits form from FEMA, or call FEMA up with the client. There's a whole process involved. There's a release of information document that was showed earlier that needs to be submitted, and needs to, and in this way the DCM can get that information. So the DCM has identified all of the unmet needs, puts a recovery plan together, is looking at an appeal, whether or not they get additional money, can get additional funding from FEMA if they're entitled to any additional funds via an appeal. And then there's a gap. So then they look at, well, what are the sources that we have? So, and this is all part of the long-term recovery. So the long-term, as a DCM looks at this, the recovery is going to be more of a long-term nature. And here we'll say recovery is that time following a disaster in which agencies and organizations help affected persons and communities to develop and implement plans and structures for an extended period, over a period of time. So this is where the long-term recovery group will start to fit in. They'll start to evolve and be established. And the long-term recovery group is a collaborative body consisting of representatives from faith-based, nonprofit, government, business, and other organizations working within the community to assist individuals and families as they recover from a disaster. So the recovery for the survivor, the household, is going to be long-term. And in addition to the insurance and the FEMA appeals and other basic other advocacy to other local organizations, now you start looking at whether or not the long-term recovery group can provide some assistance, and possibly down the road CDBG if that's awarded. And here in this diagram, the LTRG is the central focus with different community-based organizations. And again, as they're created, they perform this outreach with all of these different organizations, and they're able to work with them, obtain resources, and be able to share that with the DCMs. This is the different sections and functions that a long-term recovery group can have: disaster case management, financial controls, emotional, spiritual, communications, donations management, volunteer management, construction management. With the disaster case management within that organization, you'll have possibly unmet needs tables that will hear case presentations and that will make awards or provide assistance. These different functions are not always necessary within a LTRG. Some they may have all of them, some they may have some of them. It depends on how they're set up and how they're set up with their different bylaws. When we look at the DCMs and the LTRGs, there's a special relationship, and the interaction between DCM and LTRG recovery groups. The DCM plays a vital part of that recovery service. The DCM is a primary contact with the client, and the LTRG assists with resource allocation, construction, and volunteer management, and to fulfill the unmet needs and other functions. And they are the link between the LTRG and the client, that is the DCM. And every LTRG, one of the things when you look at the LTRGs, they should have a fair and equitable process for the disaster case management to present cases to access recovery funds on behalf of clients. So the DCMs know that when they go to the LTRG, there is an equitable process that they have in place. So the DCM relationship to the LTRGs can provide DCM managers with a venue for case presentation. DCM will not provide client-specific information at the time of presentation. Confidentiality must be maintained, but aggregate information is necessary for resources to flow. And the DCMs can help LTRGs understand and verify trends. The LTRGs help DCMs understand what resource providers need to know about clients and what resources are available. And LTRGs can help develop the resources, and LTRGs can help coordinate volunteer labor, assistance, and other donated resources. So when you have all these different relationships, the DCM has these different relationships, and now they're ready to make a presentation to the LTRG. And here is a checklist that the DCM could go through. So this way, on their behalf, they can prepare for any potential questions that may be asked. And these different items here can be used by the LTRG for different questions that can be asked of the DCM when making the presentation. And generally, the Unmet Needs Committee will set up a presentation schedule. DCM goes in and presents based on an application that's been completed. They'll make the presentation, the DCM leaves the room, the Unmet Needs Committee has a discussion, decides whether or not to provide the award, if they decide to do so. Bring the DCM back, they inform the DCM of the award amount, and then discuss any future appeals. When you look at the DCM, you have the client needs, you have the LTRG has a fixed amount of funds that they can use, and all of the presentations will be funneled into the LTRG or the Unmet Needs Committee but unfortunately, not all of them will get funded, and then the DCM has to look for other resources. And as I mentioned earlier, they may have the CDBG Community Block Development Grant may be something that may happen, or that may come down the road, or the individual may have to take out a line of credit, a loan, or to complete or to fill that gap. So during this presentation, we talked about disasters, talked about the DCM program, disaster case managers, the process of DCM, sequence of delivery, FEMA appeals, and DOBs, and the DCM and the relationship to LTRGs. Do I have any questions? Thank you very much for listening and attending. So any questions?
I'm taking a look at the chat. Rick was asking if we can get a copy of the presentation.
Absolutely.
We had a question about case managers
Sure.
from Julia.
Yeah, so Julia, and I'm not sure if that question is for Anthony specifically or just for the general group. But asking if someone could speak who the case managers are currently, and
Okay.
if there's a need for case management right now.
Yes, I mean, as far as, this is Julia, just trying to identify who's doing this work currently. Would love to hear from anybody on this call. If I can say, as far as Lutheran disaster response, we have a couple cases we're working with in undeclared areas and one or two in declared areas, but just don't really have visibility on what the case management is in the rest of the affected areas. Is anyone doing case management currently?
Julia, I can briefly, I know that Montgomery County has 4 nonprofits actually that are doing case management, but it is limited to the Montgomery County area.
Are they working with homeowners also, or just with people in hotels and renters?
So right now their focus is the families that are staying in the hotels that are being provided by the county. They are aware of other residents that have needs as well. But I'm not sure what is the level of interaction with those survivors in particular, but I can always ask them that. We actually have a meeting with this group, some members of this group tomorrow.
I guess, could you also then speak to, if we're not hearing that there's much case management going on right now, it can, Anthony or anybody else, can you speak to why, like a little bit more about why this is so critical as far as like the equity piece of it, the duplication of benefits, the net
Sure.
concern
Sure.
around losing benefits because of duplication?
I think there's more about the loss of benefits, and if you start to think, it's especially when I talked about the process of registration with FEMA and then applying for SBA loans. If you start to look at the statistics and the percentage of families or individuals that have applied to FEMA, you'll find that the percentage that is applied for these SBA loans is very, very low. And I've seen that across the country. And the impact that has is that they may or may not, it depends on the situation. But if you're not applying for the SBA loan, you may not be eligible for some of the ONA. There's some ONA that you're automatically medical, dental, stuff like that. But there's other benefits that you need to at least apply for the SBA loan, and from there you can it can be determined whether or not you would have additional resources. And I think Alicia was talking about a case this morning where they went back and because they were able to go through ONA, they were able to get additional assistance. So it's things like that where the people don't know, the survivors don't know, and they just don't have that information. So by having a DCM come in early, and that's been one of the problems with many of these programs where a DCM doesn't come in until a few months down the road. And that's why it would always be great to have an IDCMP program, which does not exist anymore. But once you can get these DCMs in there and in contact with the survivors, at least these different options can be shared with them and they know what to do. And especially on the appeals process, many times families and survivors get declined on simple issues that can be rectified by just reading the document and providing some of the information, and the disaster case manager can help them through that process. So as you can see at the get-go, there's hope that they can provide with appeals, there's help guidance on the SBA, and then there's maybe some other organizations that are providing resources at this current time that they can help them with. So by not doing that, you have this lag. So now you're waiting until a DCMP program, if it's ever comes about. Now you have this lag where there's many things that could have been done to help them. And also the other thing is you'll have the DCM will be sharing with them, save your receipts, document everything, because you don't know later on if there is a CDBG, Community Block Development Grant, that comes on, then all of these things tie in. You may not be eligible for it because you didn't do something ahead of time. So all of these factors will tend to talk about that. If you don't follow the process, the survivor homeowner could be out of luck and may not be able to optimize all of the benefits that they're eligible for.
I see here another question focused on equity. So Barry was asking, I need an explanation concerning the equity portion of this. Are we talking about geographic equity or personal equity? And I'll let someone, if someone wants to talk on that piece.
What do they mean, equitable?
I think that, I can speak only like on the FEMA side of it, and Amy or Terry, please feel to jump in as well. So we're talking of equity in all forms, of course. So, whenever a disaster happens, we are concerned of making sure that everyone is being served appropriately. So whether it is based on the geographic area that they're concentrated, making sure that, everyone from all zip codes kind of have the same access to the services that we provide. People that have access and functional needs, language barriers, all of that is taken into consideration. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. Please feel free to unmute, or if anyone wants to talk about that as well.
I mean, and this is Julia, I can jump in. When I was the one who started using that word equity when I brought that up, but I guess I think of it in terms of the disaster case management process it inherently seeks to look at a family's resources, what they've strived to accomplish on their own, and then kind of illuminates where gaps are as far as what their access to resources are and so forth, whether it's related to access and functional needs or whatever. So it helps to help people get what they need, taking into consideration all factors. I think some of the times we see early on, like the early part of disaster, there's money flowing and everyone kind of gets, a $500 gift card or whatever. But as time goes on, different people need different things, and the case management process illuminates that. And it's something that I guess I feel really strongly that's valuable in having disaster case management.
Sure. And, and it also, when you're looking at the recovery process too, And Julia, you mentioned this, where it takes into account the resources that the individual or the family has, and that all is factored in. You want to look at what there's some assistance that you can get from FEMA. There's some assistance you may be able to get from SBA, ONA, but that kind of equalizes, because if you have resources, then you're expected to be able to take those resources and put them into the bucket, so to speak, for your own recovery, versus someone or a family that doesn't have any resources, whereas they'll be able to get maybe more assistance than maybe someone who had some independent or individual resources available to them.
Yeah, and just kind of like to comment on that as well. This is why case management is so important. And I'm not even talking about the case management grant here, but just case management in general, because it is an overwhelming process. There are a lot of resources out there, but it is hard to navigate. And the case manager is really the one that's going to be talking to that survivor on a weekly basis, or however frequently they can talk to them and kind of check in on them, see where they're at in their FEMA status, in the FEMA process, see what other needs, unmet needs they may have, and just really help them navigate the process. If the resources are there, but the survivor doesn't know about them or doesn't know how to access them, then essentially the resource is not there for that survivor, because they're not even aware of it, or they can't reach it. And the case manager is the one that's gonna be able to explain and advocate for that survivor as well.
That's so true. And many of the organizations may not want the individual survivor to come directly to the organization, and they prefer for them to go through a case manager. So that case manager will make certain they vet them, make certain that there is an unmet need, and et cetera, and that they adhere to the requirements of what the organization puts out. So that's another factor for a need for a DCM.
Anthony, this is Stephanie. I had a quick question. I was wondering if you could bring that slide back up, the client recovery slide with the circle and the case manager in the center. And so it's right before, there it is. So what you and Julia are saying is that without that middle piece of the puzzle.
Right. Without this.
Okay, so what happened, right. So what happens to the client recovery if you take out that middle piece, the case manager?
Well, the client then has to do it on his or her own. And how do they know where to go and what to do? And keep in mind that the only contact they would, assuming they applied and registered with FEMA. So the only interaction they've had so far is with FEMA, and that's all they know. So with FEMA, you're looking at SBA, ONA, that's it. So they don't know anything about any other long-term recovery group. They don't know about if there's any other organizations that are offering funding. They don't know about if there's an unmet needs table that can help. They don't know anything. So you take this out, all they're exposed to is FEMA. You put this back into the equation, the case manager. This case manager, through means of communication, now has access to all of these different areas, all of these different organizations. So now you can see how the avenue or the approach to for recovery has now expanded to where you now bring in all these different organizations that can now come in and play. Can you just imagine that one individual, after all the trauma that you've gone through, trying to reach out to all of these different organizations? And there could be multiple organizations that you can reach out to, but the survivor gets so frustrated and that it just becomes very a daunting task for them to do. So that's why the survivor deals with the case manager, and the case manager has the contacts and relationships with all these other organizations that helps facilitate getting and advocating getting help for that individual. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, Anthony.
And this is Terry, and if you would take that case manager out of the picture, you're going to see a big hole there for a client to fall through and not get any help.
Right.
And the other thing I would say is all these resources.
You're breaking up.
Cut out,
Terry.
Terry.
Terry, I think we lost you.
Yeah.
Many other things is very critical.
Terry, I think we
Terry-
lost you for a little bit.
Yeah, we didn't hear what you said.
I think you are correct. I just saw my little blue thing come up. I don't know if you heard the part about the volunteer labor that is.
Terry, we lost you again.
I think.
Of course.
Oh, okay. I was going to chime in, but that's fine.
No, Anthony, go ahead because.
Yeah, I think
no
what she.
issues till just now.
Yeah, that's fine, but I think Terry's also talking about, she just touched on the voluntary labor. Well, that's not, sometimes you have some people that will go through and touch base with some of the survivors, but in my experience, these volunteer organizations, I'll give an example, like Samaritan's Purse, work through DCMs, and we had the cases, we've identified and vetted the clients, and those are clients that we can refer to different voluntary organizations. And you talk about voluntary, we talked about Mennonites, we talked about Samaritan's Purse, but also voluntary labor, and all that is generally coordinated through an LTRC. And again, it's the DCM being the focal point, presenting the unmet needs to the LTRC, and they having the resources, and one of them can be voluntary volunteers, the volunteer labor to help in address whatever project they have on hand.
Great, thank you, Anthony. Does anyone else has any questions? Feel free to use the chat or unmute.
I had a follow-up question, Anthony. So for this and for the, LTRG slide, no, this is scalable,
Yes.
measurable, scalable. So generally you're not waiting for, we need this many people in order to start this. They might start trickling in and you can scale it up.
Yeah, whenever generally what will happen is you'll look at the number of registrations that are FEMA registrations, and that's kind of a baseline, and that will tell you, and there's certain formulas that everyone uses, FEMA uses to determine, but you can use that as a basis to identify how many DCMs that you can need. When you're setting up a program, and let's say, for example, it's, and again, I'm just throwing a number out there, let's say it's 10 DCMs that you need, you'll have one DCM supervisor. But it's not the case where you have to hire all 10 DCMs at the same time, because you can scale it, you can hire 3 or 4, look at what the flow is going to be. And then, we talked about 35 per. If you start to see wait lists, then you can add on more DCMs. But the number of DCMs is a function of the of the formula that they use for the registrations, and also it depends on the allotment or the budget that's available for the DCMP. Yeah, and generally they're pretty much in line with the number of registrations that are there. But yes, in any of these programs, you can scale them up, and it's all scalable.
Thank you.
I think, Anthony, that's exactly making a good reference to the question that we received from Barry. A town of maybe 10,000 people should have 10 case managers. When a disaster happens, would you need more than 1 or 2 case managers? I guess it depends also if, are these 10,000 people needing help or, you know?
Well, and yes, and that again, we go back to the FEMA registration list, and that's where a lot of the determinations are made as to the number of DCMs. I mean, for example, if you have in one county, there's 15 FEMA registrations, and in another county, there's only 500 or 1,000 FEMA registrations. I mean, you can look at that and, you know, it's a no-brainer. The other county with the 10,000 is going to have more DCMs, or should have more DCMs to help with those survivors. So that's kind of a ballpark. But there's as I said, there's a formula that's utilized by FEMA that kind of gives some guidance as to how many case managers you would need.
And I mean, I'll just jump. This is Julia again. A rule of thumb is 10% of the registration. So in Chester County, where you are, Barry, 2,500 approximately registrations as far as what I was looking at last. Is that right? I think so. Somewhere around there, 10%. So expecting 250 cases looking for needing long-term recovery assistance is a rule of thumb that could be used. And so then looking at somewhere around 6 or 7 disaster case managers to serve those families based on the kind of numbers that were presented in this forum.
Perfect. Any other questions or comments from anyone? This is great conversation.
This is Jen from Coatesville. Julia, we had talked before. I think I was on a meeting with a couple of you guys before. Just wondering what your thoughts are. I think basically we're doing case management right now. Would that be accurate? And would there be a benefit to us being formal FEMA disaster case managers? Or is that a thing? Or would you consider us already doing what you consider case management?
I'm not sure which Julia you're referring to, but I'll give a stab at it. It's the disaster case managers aren't FEMA disaster case managers. They're usually from one of the nonprofit groups, or like yours, or it could be from a traditional disaster agency like Southern Baptist Disaster Response, although they don't do case management a whole lot, or Lutheran Disaster Response. So it's usually agencies that step up, or even it could be county agencies that step up. So the question is, I guess, to your question, as far as are you doing case management, you probably, from what I understand, it sounds like you're doing casework. You said that people come in and if they have a need, you serve them. But I guess I'd say the case management is really like going through the whole, like, are you looking at a family's income? Are you looking at what resources they have? What are some of their barriers to recovery? That to me would be the long-term like disaster case management piece of it. And I just don't know if you're doing that or not. And really, we'd love to hear, what the plans are from Chester County as far as forming that long-term recovery committee, and whether there's an interest in really moving forward on getting a formal disaster case management program in place through your agency, through others, partnering with BOADs, but to really get to the heart of what a family's resources are and what they have available to them through the various federal programs that are on the table right now, I think requires a little bit more in-depth kind of work with families, but you can speak to that better than I can, honestly.
Okay, yeah, I definitely was talking about you, you, Julia, I've been in a meeting with, but yeah, I would say we're somewhere kind of in between then, because we're out there doing that investigative work and finding out what the things are that are holding them back from recovery, and looking at the whole picture and trying to find the resources from all different avenues that they would need. So I guess I'm kind of evaluating what the benefits would be and what the differences would be of becoming a formal case manager.
I don't know if Anthony, you can speak to that. Or
Have you developed a, have you gone through an assessment, so you've identified what their unmet needs are? Have you put together a recovery plan, itemizing all of their unmet needs, setting up goals? Are you tracking at all of those contacts? Are you going out, and now that you have this recovery plan, trying to advocate and obtain different resources to meet those unmet needs?
Yeah, so I would say that pretty well explains what we do.
Okay.
I don't know your exact format of things, but yeah, tracking things, finding resources for all the unmet needs. We could potentially be more thorough if there was a specific, super specific process for it. But yeah, I mean, we could do a meeting separately as well to talk about it. I guess we're just kind of evaluating the benefits of being that formal disaster case manager. And we would be doing that for Coatesville, not all of Chester County.
Has a LTRG been set up yet?
So my understanding is that there is a group with different organizations in it in Chester County who previously were, and maybe I'm using the wrong terminology. Maybe that's a VOAD and not an LTRG.
Yeah, that's different then.
Yeah,
I mean,
there is,
Go ahead.
there has been Chester County has a long-term recovery committee established.
Okay. Yeah, going back to that DCMP, are you, have you appealed any cases to FEMA? How many appeals do you have on the table for the cases that you have?
We normally have the individuals try to appeal on their own if they're able to, and then legal aid has actually been helping them with that as well. So a decent number, I would say maybe at least 10 of the families have been through that process.
Okay, all right, good. And have you been looking at their what assistance they have received from FEMA? So this way you don't have any duplication of benefits?
Yes. And like I said, a lot of those kind of got minimal things and were appealing because of that. A few of them had gotten a decent amount of resources, but it still didn't cover everything that needed to be done.
Okay.
And then from there on out, the ones that weren't appealing are mostly renters. Coatesville is mostly a landlord renter scenario. So a lot of it is working with, a lot of what I'm doing is working with landlords as well to try and get the utilities back on.
Okay. And you've helped the anyone who's been eligible to seek an SBA loan, you've helped them with that also?
Mostly landlords sending to SBA loans. Some of the renters have gone through the SBA loan process,
Okay.
like you explained, so that they can be denied and then be
Right.
able to
Oh, and then-
eligible for other things.
Okay, good.
And Jen, this is Julia with FEMA. Just want to make sure that you have the contact information from us, the Vals, in case you have any questions on the FEMA side of things.
Yes,
Does
thank
he-
you. I think I
okay.
have Bill's. Is it Bill? I can't remember. I'm getting the bills mixed up. There, I do have them. I do have the
Okay,
contact
okay,
info in my
perfect.
email.
And
Thank
then
you.
Yeah, and I also have my email in the chat, and I am regional, so you can feel free to ask me any questions if there's any cases. We do have a task force internally that is reviewing some FEMA cases. So if there's anyone stuck, obviously there's the written consent agreement, and we might not be able to share everything that's going on, but you can definitely bring some cases to our attention as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question
Jen,
for
and this-
Bill.
Oh, sorry, Jen, Manthe, this is Stephanie. Yep, we please reach out and send us any questions you have. And the task force that Julia mentioned is internal at the request of the individual assistance branch director. We stood up a task force to create a process flow. Just in general, where people are going through the FEMA process, and our IHP colleagues they're there to ensure that all the appropriate actions have been taken on a case in order to maximize federal resources. So
Okay.
in this slide, it's the federal government FEMA, piece of the puzzle, and we're just working really hard to make sure that applicants are getting the maximum federal resources they can get. And then they go through that. I know I talked about a flow chart, Julia. I haven't forgotten about that. I can present it in another meeting with VOAD and be happy to do that. And yes, please do send us individual case numbers, just registration number only, no PII. And if it's a severe stuck case, we'll take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Julie. I was just going to ask Bill, you said that there's a long-term recovery committee in Chester County. That's great to hear. Could you share the meeting information so that we can engage some of the VOAD partners and some of the local churches and so forth in that?
Sure, I can do that. I can, Darshana from the United Way is our chair, but I'll get you that info.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? This has been a great conversation. I just want to be mindful of our time, but we still have some time left. So I just want to keep the floor open. All right, hearing none, I just want to say thank you so much again for Anthony and Alicia for the great presentation. Also, thank you, Julia and Chip for chiming in on the questions and helping us navigate some of the things related to the VOAD and the volunteer agencies. We have put our contact information in the chat, so feel free to email us. If you have any questions about anything, we will be sending out an email with some of the content that we shared here is some additional resources for you. And again, this is a webinar series. So we are currently making plans for the next presentations that we're going to be hosting. So more to come on that. And thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day.